You're chasing the wrong people because you're trying to force what should flow naturally. And Florence Scovel Shinn discovered why that always fails. I'm about to show you the divine selection method that brings your perfect match without the chase, the heartbreak, or the confusion. Hit subscribe to Attraction Magnet right now, smash that like button, and at the end tell me in the comments which part changed your perspective, because this is gonna flip everything you believe about finding love. Let's dive in. Most people approach relationships like hunting, chasing after specific people they've decided they want, trying to make someone love them, forcing connections that resist naturally, and wondering why it always ends in disappointment or rejection. Florence Scovel Shinn discovered something that sounds completely backwards but works perfectly every single time. The more you chase a specific person, the more you push them away energetically. Because chasing comes from lack consciousness, from the belief that love is scarce and you have to grab it before it disappears. This desperate energy repels the very thing you're seeking because desperation vibrates at the frequency of "I don't have" rather than "I am attracting what's mine." The universe doesn't respond to your words or actions, it responds to the energetic frequency you're broadcasting. And when you're in chase mode, you're broadcasting lack, fear, and unworthiness, which magnetizes more situations that make you feel lacking, fearful, and unworthy. Florence worked with countless people who spent years pursuing specific individuals who seemed perfect on paper, who checked all their boxes, who they were convinced were the one, only to experience endless frustration, mixed signals, hot and cold behavior, or outright rejection that crushed them. These weren't bad people or wrong people necessarily, they simply weren't the divine selection, the person who belonged to them by divine right, the match that would flow naturally without force. The real issue wasn't the person being chased, it was the entire approach of selecting someone with the limited human mind and then trying to make it work through effort, manipulation, or willpower. Florence taught that your conscious mind, your ego, your surface-level desires don't actually know what's best for you in the realm of relationships. They're making decisions based on appearances, social conditioning, fear of being alone, or childhood wounds pretending to be preferences. Here's what's going to change your entire approach to finding love. Florence introduced the concept of divine selection, the understanding that there's a perfect match for you that's already been selected by infinite intelligence. Someone who complements your soul's journey, who shows up at the exact right time, who loves you effortlessly for who you truly are, and who you'll recognize by how easy and natural the connection feels. This isn't about settling or lowering your standards. It's about raising your standards so high that you refuse to accept anything less than divine perfection, which means releasing your grip on specific people your ego has chosen, and opening yourself to receive the person your soul is meant to meet. The moment you stop chasing and start trusting divine selection, you shift from forcing to allowing, from desperation to magnetic attraction, from begging for scraps to claiming your divine inheritance. But if divine selection always brings the perfect person, why do most people never discover this method and waste years chasing wrong matches? Florence documented a perfect example of divine selection in action that illustrates exactly how this principle works in real life. A woman came to her desperately in love with a man she called AB, convinced he was her soulmate, obsessing over him constantly, analyzing every interaction, waiting for him to finally see how perfect they'd be together. She asked Florence to speak the word that she would marry AB, essentially asking for spiritual manipulation to force this man into loving her and committing to her. This is what most people want, some cosmic override that makes their chosen person fall in love with them regardless of whether it's actually right or aligned. Florence refused. explaining that this would be a violation of spiritual law, an attempt to override someone's free will and divine path, which always backfires eventually, even if it temporarily succeeds. Instead, Florence offered to speak the word for the right man, the divine selection, the person who belonged to this woman by divine right, adding a crucial statement that became the key to everything that followed. If AB is the right man, you can't lose him, and if he isn't, you will receive his equivalent or better. This completely shifted the woman's energy from desperate clinging to open receptivity, from forcing one specific outcome to trusting the best possible outcome. She continued seeing AB regularly after this, but something fundamental had changed. She'd released her death grip on making it work, stopped obsessing over his every word and action, and started trusting that whatever was meant for her couldn't miss her. Nothing externally changed at first. AB remained lukewarm and non-committal. Their friendship didn't progress toward romance, but the woman noticed her own internal state transforming week by week. Here's the part that demonstrates divine selection perfectly. About a week after releasing AB to divine will, the woman called Florence and said something remarkable. "Do you know, for the last week, AB hasn't seemed so wonderful to me." Her obsession was dissolving naturally without effort, which meant her energy was shifting from attachment to freedom. Florence replied, "Maybe he is not the divine selection. Another man may be the right one." Soon after that conversation, the woman met another man who fell in love with her immediately, who pursued her with genuine enthusiasm, who said all the things she'd always wished AB would say, who saw her as his ideal and wasn't afraid to show it. She described it as quite uncanny how perfectly this new man matched everything she'd actually wanted, and she found herself naturally returning his love while completely losing interest in AB. The divine selection had appeared the moment she stopped blocking him with her attachment to the wrong person, and the match was so obviously right that she wondered how she'd ever been obsessed with AB. But if divine selection always provides someone better when you release the wrong person, why does letting go feel so terrifying? Your ego, that part of you that operates from fear, lack, and social conditioning, is completely incompetent at selecting romantic partners, yet most people let it run the entire show when it comes to dating and relationships. Florence understood that the ego chooses based on surface appearances, what looks good to others, what fills an emotional wound from childhood, what seems safe and familiar, or what represents status, security, or validation. None of these criteria have anything to do with actual compatibility, soul connection, or divine alignment, which is why ego-selected relationships either never materialize or eventually crumble under the weight of mismatched energies. The ego is literally incapable of seeing beyond its own limited programming. It can't perceive someone's soul, their true character, their divine purpose, or how they'll impact your spiritual journey years down the road. Florence worked with people who consistently chose unavailable partners, not because they consciously wanted unavailability, but because their ego was running an unconscious program from childhood that associated love with pain, rejection, or having to work hard for attention. Their ego would scan a room full of people and magnetically zoom in on the one person who would recreate their childhood wound, passing right by multiple available, healthy, interested candidates without even noticing them. This isn't coincidence or bad luck. It's ego programming operating with perfect precision, always seeking to validate the stories it believes about love, worthiness, and relationships. Another common pattern is the ego choosing partners based on social approval, selecting someone who looks perfect on paper, checks all the boxes, makes friends and family happy, but leaves the person feeling empty or disconnected because the ego completely ignored whether there was actual chemistry, shared values, or spiritual resonance. Here's what's going to revolutionize how you approach relationships. When you surrender mate selection to divine intelligence and trust the divine selection process, you're bypassing your ego's terrible track record and accessing infinite wisdom that knows things your conscious mind could never figure out. Divine intelligence sees the entire picture, past patterns you need to break, lessons you need to learn, wounds that need healing, your soul's purpose, and how a partner either supports or hinders it, that person's true character beneath their social mask, how the relationship will unfold 5 or 10 years from now, and countless other factors your ego can't even comprehend. This is why divine selection always provides someone better than who your ego wanted, because divine intelligence isn't working with the limited criteria of appearances, status, or filling childhood wounds. It's matching you with someone who serves your highest evolution and brings genuine fulfillment. The ego wants what looks good. Divine intelligence wants what is good, and they're rarely the same person. But if your ego is this bad at choosing partners, how do you access divine selection instead? Florence taught a specific spiritual practice that activates divine selection and magnetizes your perfect match, and it's both simpler and more powerful than complicated manifestation techniques or trying to manipulate specific outcomes. The foundation is a prayer or spoken decree that releases your attachment to specific people while claiming your divine right to perfect partnership. Florence's version was something like this: Infinite intelligence, I release AB to his highest good. If he is the divine selection, the man who belongs to me by divine right, I cannot lose him. If he is not, I receive his equivalent or better. I am now attracting the divine selection, my perfect spiritual match, and he is attracted to me. C2, this prayer does several crucial things simultaneously. It releases attachment and control, acknowledges divine intelligence as the selector, claims your right to perfect partnership, and activates magnetic attraction from both directions. The power isn't in the specific words, though words matter. The power is in the energetic shift that happens when you genuinely surrender control and trust divine timing and selection. Most people pray for specific outcomes. Please make John love me. Please bring Sarah back into my life. Please let this date lead to marriage, which are all attempts to override divine will with ego preferences. These prayers don't work because they're based on force rather than flow, on human limited vision rather than divine infinite wisdom. When you shift to praying for divine selection, you're essentially saying, I trust that infinite intelligence knows better than I do. I release my grip on my limited ideas of who I should be with, and I open myself to receive whoever and whatever is truly best for my highest good. This requires genuine faith, because you're giving up control without knowing exactly what you'll receive in return, trusting the process even when it takes unexpected turns. Here's the part most people miss about divine selection prayers. You must maintain the consciousness of having already received your divine selection even before they physically appear in your life, living in the feeling of being perfectly loved, treating yourself as if your perfect partner is already on their way to you, making decisions from the energy of being in a divine relationship rather than desperately seeking one. Florence called this living in the end, occupying the emotional state of your desire fulfilled before seeing physical evidence. When you pray for divine selection and then immediately return to desperate seeking, you cancel out the prayer with contradictory energy. The prayer sets the intention, but your consistent consciousness between prayers is what actually magnetizes the manifestation. A woman who used this method described how she stopped obsessing over dating apps, checking her ex's social media, or analyzing why she was still single, and instead started enjoying her life fully, making decisions that honored herself, and trusting that her perfect partner was being divinely guided to her at exactly the right moment. Within weeks, she met someone who exceeded everything she'd been chasing, and the relationship developed easily without any of her usual relationship anxiety. But if this prayer works so powerfully, why do some people pray for divine selection and still feel like nothing changes? One of the most challenging aspects of divine selection is the requirement to fully release what you're clinging to before you can receive what's actually meant for you. And this feels counterintuitive because the ego believes that holding on tighter increases chances of success. Florence taught the spiritual law that you cannot receive with clenched fists. Your hands must be open and empty to accept new gifts, which means releasing old attachments, past relationships, specific people you're fixated on, and the timeline you've decided things should happen on. This isn't just a nice spiritual concept. It's how energy actually works. When you're energetically bound to the wrong person through obsession, resentment, hope, or fantasy, you're literally unavailable to receive the right person, even if they're trying to reach you. Your energy field is already occupied. There's no space for new love to enter, because old love, or the illusion of love, is taking up all the room. Florence observed that people would pray desperately for their perfect partner while remaining emotionally entangled with someone from their past, checking their social media, hoping they'd reach out, fantasizing about reconciliation, keeping clothes or gifts that held memories, essentially keeping one foot in a dead relationship while claiming they wanted something new. This split energy prevents divine selection from manifesting because you're sending mixed signals to the universe, saying you want new love while simultaneously holding space for old love. The universe can't deliver your perfect match when you're still energetically coupled with an imperfect match, consciously or unconsciously. Release isn't about forcing yourself to stop caring or pretending you're over someone when you're not. It's about genuinely surrendering them to their own path, wishing them well, and energetically calling your energy back to yourself so you're whole and available for what's next. Here's what makes release so powerful in activating divine selection. The moment you truly let go, not from a place of giving up or bitterness, but from genuine surrender and trust, you create an energetic vacuum that the universe immediately rushes to fill with something better. Nature abhors a vacuum, and spiritual law operates on this same principle. Release creates space, and space invites manifestation. Florence told her clients that they would know they'd genuinely released when they could think about the person or situation without emotional charge, when they could wish them well authentically, and when they felt complete within themselves, regardless of whether that relationship ever materialized. This state of release is actually a state of wholeness. You're no longer looking to another person to complete you, validate you, or fix your emotional wounds, which paradoxically makes you incredibly magnetic to healthy love. A man used this principle after years of being stuck on an ex who'd left him. He finally reached the point of genuine release, where he could honestly say, "I wish her the best," and mean it, feeling complete within himself. Within 3 weeks, he met someone who loved him in ways his ex never had, and he realized his attachment to his ex had been blocking his blessing the entire time. But if release is so essential, how do you actually do it when your emotions refuse to let go? Florence taught one of the most powerful and underused spiritual principles when it comes to relationships, the law of substitution, which states that when you release something that isn't right for you, divine intelligence always provides something better to take its place. This law is crucial for understanding divine selection because it removes the fear that letting go means ending up with nothing or losing your only chance at love. The ego creates scarcity thinking, convincing you that this person might be your last opportunity, that you're too old or too damaged or too whatever to find someone else, that a flawed relationship is better than no relationship. Florence demolished this lie by showing hundreds of examples where releasing the wrong person or situation immediately opened the door for the right one to enter, often in ways that exceeded what had been released. The law of substitution works through divine intelligence's perfect knowledge of what truly serves your highest good, which is always better than what your limited human perspective thinks you want. When the woman released AB and received her divine selection, that was substitution in action. The universe took away someone who would have brought mediocre, lukewarm connection and replaced him with someone who brought passionate, devoted love. There was no loss in this transaction, only gain, because you can't lose what was never truly yours, and what's truly yours can't be lost. Florence emphasized that most people cling to relationships, jobs, situations, or people out of fear of loss, not recognizing that what they're clinging to is often blocking something far better that's trying to come through. The moment you release the lesser, the greater rushes in to fill that space. But you must actually release, not just say you're releasing while secretly hoping it comes back. Here's the part about substitution that transforms everything. When divine intelligence substitutes something better for what you released, it's not just slightly better, it's usually dramatically better in ways you couldn't have imagined or orchestrated. A woman spent 3 years trying to make a relationship work with someone who was emotionally unavailable, kept her guessing, never fully committed, left her feeling anxious and insecure. She finally practiced true release, letting him go completely, blessing him and herself, trusting divine selection. Within 1 month, she met someone who was the opposite of everything that had been painful in the previous relationship. Fully available, clear about his feelings, consistent, made her feel secure and cherished, wanting the same future she wanted. She couldn't believe she'd wasted 3 years trying to force something that required constant effort when the divine selection required no effort at all, just aligned perfectly from day one. This is how you know you've received the substitution. It feels easy, natural, right? Like something clicking into place, rather than something you're forcing to fit. But if substitution always provides better, why does the ego resist releasing so intensely? One of the most common questions people ask about divine selection is how they'll know when they've met the right person, especially after experiencing false connections that felt right initially but eventually revealed themselves as wrong. Florence taught specific signs that indicate you're dealing with your divine selection, rather than another ego-chosen mismatch. And these signs are dramatically different from the intense drama and confusion that often accompany wrong relationships. The divine selection is marked by ease, not by intensity or drama. Things flow naturally without constant obstacles. Communication is clear rather than confusing. Commitment happens without games or manipulation, and both people feel they've found something rare and worth protecting. This doesn't mean there are no challenges or growth required, but the foundation feels solid rather than shaky, supportive rather than threatening, expanding rather than limiting. Florence pointed out that people often mistake intensity for connection, confusing the high drama of an unstable relationship with passion, or the anxiety of uncertainty with excitement, when these are actually red flags indicating misalignment. The divine selection typically doesn't create chaos in your life. It creates peace, even when it challenges you to grow. The challenge comes from a place of love and support, rather than judgment or control. You'll notice that with your divine selection, you can be authentically yourself without pretending or performing. They love you for who you truly are rather than who you're trying to be. Conflicts resolve through communication rather than escalating into warfare. And you feel more like yourself in the relationship rather than losing yourself. Another key indicator is timing. Divine selection shows up when you're ready for them, often after you've done inner work and shifted your consciousness, whereas ego selections often appear when you're desperate, lonely, or running from yourself. Here's what completely changes how you evaluate potential partners. Florence taught that the divine selection will say and do the things you've been wanting someone to say and do, almost like they can read your deepest desires without you having to teach them or manipulate them into it. The woman in the AB story described her divine selection as uncanny because he naturally said all the things she'd wished AB would say, things she'd never even told this new man she wanted to hear. He just knew. This is divine intelligence at work, orchestrating a match so perfect that it feels destined rather than coincidental. Your divine selection will also appear at a time when you can actually receive them, not when you're still healing from past trauma or obsessing over someone else, but when you've cleared space energetically and emotionally for a healthy relationship. A man recognized his divine selection because, unlike every relationship before where he'd felt he had to perform or prove his worth, with this woman he felt completely accepted from day one. She loved him for who he was rather than his potential, and everything felt natural rather than forced. This ease is the signature of divine selection, and once you've experienced it, you'll never again mistake drama for destiny. But if divine selection is this obvious when it arrives, why do so many people still choose wrong partners? Divine selection isn't just about the right person, it's also about the right timing. And Florence taught that forcing timing is just as destructive as forcing the wrong person into your life. Divine timing means that you and your perfect match come together when both of you are ready, when you've both completed certain lessons, healed certain wounds, and reached a consciousness that can sustain healthy partnership. Trying to rush this process by manipulating someone into commitment before they're ready, or jumping into relationship before you're healed, creates relationships that struggle from the beginning because the foundation isn't solid yet. Florence saw countless examples of people who met their divine selection years before they were ready for each other, had a brief encounter that didn't develop into anything, then met again years later when timing aligned perfectly and everything fell into place effortlessly. The ego hates divine timing because it wants what it wants immediately. It creates arbitrary timelines like, I need to be married by 30, or if we're not engaged within a year, this relationship is wrong, which add pressure and anxiety that actually repel the very thing being sought. Divine timing removes all that pressure by acknowledging that infinite intelligence sees the bigger picture, knows what preparation is needed, and will bring things together when everything aligns for maximum success and minimum struggle. This requires surrendering your timeline while trusting that divine timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't match your human preferences or plans. A woman spent her entire 20s desperately trying to find a husband, stressed about her biological clock, feeling like a failure as she watched friends marry, becoming increasingly anxious with each passing year. When she finally surrendered her timeline and trusted divine timing, focusing on enjoying her life and becoming the person she wanted to attract, she met her divine selection at 33. And she realized if they'd met earlier, neither would have been ready for what they now had together. Here's the profound truth about divine timing that changes everything. What feels like delay is often divine protection, keeping you from entering relationships that would have caused heartbreak or kept you from your true match, giving you time to develop qualities you'll need in your divine partnership, or waiting for your perfect partner to complete their own growth and preparation. Florence emphasized that there are no accidents in divine timing. If something hasn't manifested yet, it's because the moment isn't right, something isn't aligned, or better is being prepared. A man was heartbroken when a woman he loved moved away just as their relationship was developing, certain he'd lost his chance at happiness, feeling like divine selection had failed him. 5 years later, they reconnected, both having grown tremendously in the interim, and they built a relationship far more beautiful than what would have been possible when they first met. He realized the separation wasn't rejection. It was divine timing ensuring both people were fully ready for what they were about to receive. Trust divine timing even when human timing screams urgency, because patient trust always receives better than desperate forcing. But if divine timing is perfect, how do you stay patient and hopeful while waiting? The fastest way to block your divine selection from manifesting is to operate from desperate energy. And Florence taught that desperation vibrates at the exact opposite frequency of attraction, literally repelling what you're trying to draw in. Desperation says, "I need this to be happy. I'm incomplete without this. I'm running out of time. I'm not good enough alone." And all of these statements broadcast lack consciousness that magnetizes more lack. The universe doesn't respond to your words or even your actions. It responds to your energetic frequency, and desperate energy creates desperate circumstances, attracting people who sense your need and either run away or take advantage of it. Your divine selection cannot appear while you're in desperate energy, because desperation indicates you haven't recognized your own completeness. You're looking for someone to fill a void rather than complement your already whole self. Florence worked with people who did everything right on paper, said the right affirmations, visualized their perfect partner, followed dating advice, stayed positive and hopeful, yet remained single year after year. When she investigated their energy beneath the actions, she invariably found desperation hiding under the surface, a clenched grip on needing it to happen, a fear that it never would, a belief that they were broken without partnership. This subtle desperation was invisible to them but obvious to everyone they dated, creating an energetic repulsion field that kept potential partners at arm's length. The paradox is that the more desperately you need love, the more it eludes you, and the more complete you feel alone, the more love finds you. This isn't cruel or unfair, it's simply how energy works. Wholeness attracts wholeness. Desperation attracts desperation, or attracts people who exploit neediness. Here's what completely shifts desperation into magnetic attraction. You must reach a genuine place of being okay either way, where you desire partnership but don't need it to be complete, where you're building a life you love with or without a romantic relationship, where you're treating yourself with the love and respect you'd want from a partner. This isn't pretending you don't want love or playing hard to get. It's genuinely recognizing that you're already whole. A partner will enhance your already beautiful life rather than rescue you from an incomplete one. Florence taught that this state of wholeness is the most magnetic frequency you can embody, because it signals to the universe and to potential partners that you're choosing partnership from abundance rather than seeking it from lack. A woman practiced this by stopping all desperate seeking behaviors, deleted dating apps, stopped asking friends to set her up, focused on building a life that fulfilled her completely, and within 3 months met her divine selection in the most unexpected natural way through a hobby she'd started enjoying. The shift from "I need someone" to "I'm whole and open to complementary partnership" changed everything about who she attracted and how they showed up. But if desperation blocks manifestation, how do you shift out of it when you genuinely do want a relationship? Florence taught a powerful practice that collapses the time between desire and manifestation, living in the consciousness of having already received your divine selection before they physically appear in your life. This isn't fantasy or delusion, it's occupying the emotional frequency of your fulfilled desire, making decisions from that reality, treating yourself as someone who is already in their divine partnership. Most people live in the consciousness of lack, constantly aware of being single, feeling the absence of partnership, making choices based on "when I finally find someone," which keeps them locked in the frequency of not having. When you shift to living as if your divine selection is already yours, you're accessing the energetic state that magnetizes the physical manifestation. Because you're no longer waiting for something outside yourself to make you feel a certain way, you're generating that feeling from within and allowing external reality to conform to your internal state. This practice shows up in practical ways throughout your daily life. You stop settling for mediocre connections because you know your divine selection is coming. You make decisions about where you live or how you spend your time as if your perfect partner's preferences matter too. You take care of yourself the way you'd want your beloved to be cared for. You speak about your relationship as if it's already real, just waiting to manifest physically. Florence taught her clients to say things like, "My perfect partner and I," or "the man who loves me," when thinking about the future, creating a mental and emotional reality where the partnership already exists in consciousness, even though it hasn't materialized in form yet. This isn't lying or pretending, it's aligning with the truth of what exists in the spiritual realm that's making its way into the physical realm. Here's the transformation that happens when you practice this consistently. Your entire energy shifts from seeking to having, from desperate to magnetic, from future-focused to present moment embodied. And this shift is what actually draws your divine selection to you. You stop being the person scanning every room for potential partners. Stop going on dates with anxious need. Stop settling for connections that don't feel quite right because you're already living in partnership consciousness. A man practiced this by setting his dinner table for two even though he lived alone, imagining conversations with his divine selection throughout his day, making choices about his living space and schedule as if she already existed in his life. Friends thought he was crazy, but within 6 months he met someone who fit so perfectly into the life he'd been preparing that it felt like she'd always been part of it. She commented multiple times how it seemed like he'd been expecting her because energetically he had been. The physical reality simply caught up with the consciousness he'd been holding. Living as if is the bridge between desire and manifestation. And when you cross that bridge, your divine selection meets you on the other side. But if this practice works so powerfully, why do most people resist doing it? Now you have Florence Scovel Shinn's exact divine selection method that brings your perfect match without chasing, forcing, or settling for less than you deserve. Subscribe to Attraction Magnet and hit that bell icon so you keep learning ancient wisdom that actually works. Drop a comment right now telling me which of these 10 principles shocked you most, or which one you're applying today. I read and answer every single comment. Stop chasing wrong people. Your divine selection is already on their way to you.